Let's consider basic symbolizing of sound. Each sentence that follows will have a letter underlined or a series of letters within a parentheses at the end of the sentence. Those letters should be used to symbolize each phrase. There's a natural relationship between logical connectives and English connectives. To symbolize any sentence, you must know the logical connectives associated with each English connective. A table representing that is displayed here. Notice your key English words are and, but, or, either or, if, then, or simply if. And we have if and only if. And then there's one modifier, such as not, it's not the case, or it's false that. So the logical connective that's associated with and but is the conjunction, and it's symbolized as an upside down V. The logical connective associated with or either or is a disjunction, and it's symbolized as a V. When symbolizing a statement with either or, we would just put the symbol or, the symbol disjunction, where the or appears. The next type of statement is the conditional or implication. And with that, there's always a first part implying a second part. Now, many times you have the first part comes first, thus the name, but it's generally the section or this phrase that follows the if. Then, after the then, is the second part. Sometimes you may not have the then. It may just be implied. In other sentences, you may have the second part first and then the if appearing in the middle of the sentence. But what follows the if is always considered the first part when we go to symbolize it. And we always have to symbolize it as first part implies the second part. The last type of connective is biconditional, and it's associated with the words if and only if. That's used many times when we want to show the equivalence between two different words or sentences. We have one modifier that we're concerned with. It's called a negation, and it's symbolized by this tilde here. It's used when we have the word not, or it is not the case, or it is false that. Not is usually used with a single verb or noun or adjective, and whereas it is not the case is used to modify a complete sentence that may be a simple statement or a compound statement. Likewise, it's false that works the same way as it is not the case. It's used for the whole sentence. So let's start with symbolizing this statement that we're given here. The computer is cheap and the monitor is large. Well, we first want to figure out what letters we can use to represent each phrase. So we can use the letter C, from computer perhaps, to symbolize the computer is cheap. And we can use the letter M to symbolize that the monitor is large. So we're using one letter to symbolize a phrase and another letter to symbolize a different phrase. Okay. So here's a sentence that we want to symbolize with these letters C and M. When we look at a sentence, we see it has the connective and. So it must be a conjunction type statement. We'll use the conjunction symbol, the upside down V, and then we'll symbolize the sentence as C, upside down V, M. C and M, it's written. Okay, for our second sentence, we have this statement here. This is psychology class. She will study chemistry and work in the lab. The letter C we can use for she will study chemistry. And the W we can use for work in the lab. Notice we don't need any letter to represent in her psychology class. It's more of a modifier or an explanation as to where this study in the chemistry is happening. So it really doesn't appear in any one of our symbolization of this sentence in logic. So we look at our sentence, in psychology class, she will study chemistry and work in the lab. So logically, what we're really concerned with is just that she will study chemistry and work in the lab. The connective is an and, so it must be a conjunction type statement. So we use our symbol for conjunction, and we symbolize our statement as C and W. A third sentence, if the answer is to part 3 is true, then the answer to part 4 is also true. So it's an if, then sort of statement. We can use the T symbol to represent that the answer to part 3 is true. And then we can use the F symbol to represent the answer to part 4 is also true. Okay, so there's our sentence. We have noted that it's an conditional or an implication. So it's if the first part, then the second part. That's the setup is. If the first part, then the second part. So we do have this conditional type statement. And we use the arrow to represent the conditional symbol. And it would be symbolized as T implies F. Once we choose a letter for a particular phrase, we can't use that letter for a different phrase. It would really make things difficult to understand. We wouldn't know what phrase we were talking about. All right, so now we want to consider this statement here. In this statement, we can use the S to represent smile. Avery will smile. And then we use the H to represent he is happy. So when we look at our sentence, it has a basic connective of second part, if, first part. Notice the if is in the middle, and therefore what follows the if is considered the first part of the conditional. So the first part always follows your if. We use the conditional symbol for the sentence to symbolize it as H implies S. If he is happy, then he will smile. In this sentence, we have if and only if used. And we have two phrases. So we'll use the P for I will play poker, and the T for I don't have a test. So the basic statement has the connective of if and only if, which is a biconditional. We'll use the biconditional symbol, which is the arrow going in both directions, and we'll symbolize the statement as P biconditional T.